I took a course at the School of Visual Arts, but I was so impatient. I thought I knew everything at that age, and I couldn't stand the slow pace, so I dropped out and hit the streets, reckless but really enthusiastic. Years later, it was clear to me my path was drawn, and I started peddling freelance photos to the New York Post. Welcome to the Celebrity Archaeology Podcast. This is episode 1, sponsored by the Built on Dreams Network. I'm your host, Adam Scull. If this is the first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. Our goal is to preserve the cultural heritage of celebrity photography from decades past for the benefit of future generations. Pull up your chair and learn about the past. I sit at the scanner, feeding it like a pet, one slide at a time. It makes its whirring noises as it scans the slide of long-forgotten parties celebrating the famous names of our time. Stating the obvious, the personalities look so young to me now. It's hard not to feel a creeping sadness of a time long gone. We live in a time of multiple social media outlets. Websites have taken over magazines and newspapers, and we still have the remote control mentality. A quick look and then changing the channel to some sitcom or reality show or a Netflix. We move at the speed of our smartphones, flicking away the photos and quickly typing out a reply to some friend on the chat system, head bent down, oblivious to the world around us. I scan a color slide of the renowned Italian director Federico Fellini. Known for his distinct style that blends fantasy and Baroque images with earthiness, he is recognized as one of the greatest and most influential filmmakers of all time. His films have ranked in polls such as Cahiers du Cinéma and Sight and Sound as some of the greatest films of all time. Sight and Sound lists his 1963 film 8½ as the 10th greatest film of all time. These days, he is a forgotten fossil of another age. Most millennials would stop and ask who he was. It's the natural order of things, but it saddens me nonetheless. I scan a slide of Stanley Kubrick, another famous film director of the time. Dr. Strangelove, where are you when I need you the most? I was introduced to photography by my father. I had a somewhat sheltered upbringing in our large apartment on Fifth Avenue, across from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan, so the camera and the darkroom became my friend. My father was an amateur photographer. He had converted a back room of our large apartment into a darkroom. It was here where I learned how to develop film and make prints. I also used to frequent a small bookstore called A Photographer's Place, where I read and learned everything I could about photography. I took a course at the School of Visual Arts, but I was really impatient. I thought I knew everything at that age, and I couldn't stand the slow pace, so I dropped out and hit the streets, reckless but enthusiastic. It was clear to me my path was drawn, and started peddling freelance shots to the New York Post. I briefly had an internship with Women's Wear Daily. I loved it, but again, I didn't know the meaning of the word humility. I had a few words with Harry Benson, the former Beatles photographer who was in charge of the photography department at Women's Wear at the time. Former CEO Michael Cody heard about it and called me into his office and said, "Adam, you'll have a great career, but not with us." Disappointed, I just kept going. It was a very cold and overcast morning after a huge snowstorm the day before. Many had hauled out their cross-country skis and were swooshing along a snow-blanketed Park Avenue. After snapping a few shots of the skiers, I walked over to Fifth Avenue by 72nd Street, and to my utter amazement, I stumbled upon an exclusive photo shoot by a New York Post staff photographer taking pictures of the famed artist Salvador Dali. All things being equal, I ruined a staffer's exclusivity and got quite a few shots of my own. Normally, I would have called the Post photo desk and asked if they wanted to see my photos, which were really good, but I held back this time. April 26, 1977 changed everything for me. It was the opening night of Studio 54. For New York City nightlife, it was the biggest slam dunk ever. Everything paled in comparison to this wonderland that came from the gifted minds of owner Steve Rubel and his partner Ian Schrager. The city stopped dead in the tracks of Studio 54. Every night I wound up with great shots of fashion, film, and TV stars. I would call the Post photo desk and say, "I know you have a staffer shooting here, but I've got some really great photos. Want to see them?" They always said yes, and I would cab it down to South Street by the seaport, have them shoot my film, make a contact sheet, and let the mucky mucks pick their shots. They got printed as I banged out the captions on one of their old clunky Royal typewriters, taped the captions to the back of the prints, and ran out to the photo desk as if I just discovered gold. Invariably, I would wake up the next morning, run out to the newsstand, and shout with glee when I saw that I had once again made the front page with my photo. The staff guys were so angry at me, but this was business, and I was hungry. It was full-tilt boogie nightlife in the late 70s, lots of free love, and drugs that were prevalent. I didn't really care, though. I wasn't a partier. I was there to work. I had to be on guard all the time. I'd position myself at the edge of the dance floor so I could catch who was coming and going, and I could see the VIP area. It wasn't so much fun for me because I was working, and I was only as good as my last shot, which in my case happened to be the front page of the New York Post. Studio 54 was not just about weekends. Thursday nights were big nights there. I remember Bianca Jagger coming in on a white Palomino on her birthday. A young and aggressive Robert De Niro broke a photographer's camera one night. Sean Penn said he wanted to be like De Niro, and that's why he always acted so poorly with the press. Some customers went in just to undress. You could always count on Rollerina, who was called the Queen of Studio 54, to walk around in just her pasties. Every morning, 8 out of 10 of my pictures either made page 1 or were sitting on page 3 or 5. The beginning of celebrity archaeology may have started with this one decision. Before the digital age, we kept our pockets stuffed with film. We duplicated all of our lenses and flashes with a second camera. One camera was for the Post because they only used black and white photos at the time, and the second camera was filled with color slide film for me to sell. We made out like bandits selling them to photo magazines all around the world. This was the start of my now priceless photo collection. I got a phone call from the executive photo editor of the Post. She offered me a staff job at the new newspaper that the Post was hoping to bring out, an Americanized version of the London Sun. Foolish though it may have been, I declined the offer, because there was only one thing I wanted, a position on the New York Post. Nothing else would do. With the second call, my wish came true when I was offered that staff position on the Post. I was finally hired in 1978 as a general assignment photographer at the Post, shortly after the New York City newspaper strike. I remember one early assignment when I was told to go to Brooklyn to cover a fire. This Fifth Avenue raised photographer didn't know how to get to Brooklyn. I had never even been to Brooklyn. I never made it there. I lied to the photo desk on my two-way radio and told them the fire was already out. One day, I was asked to shoot an evening of parties and film premieres. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I did so well that the photo desk said that was now my new permanent assignment. I had no issue with that idea at all, and continued shooting celebrities from 1978 onward. I worked at the New York Post from 1978 to 1982, and then returned to freelancing. From 1985 to 1988, I was back on staff again. I just couldn't make up my mind. But there was a change in culture at the New York Post that didn't suit me as a staff shooter, so it was back to freelancing. In 1996, I started Photolink, my own photo agency. I had my ups and downs, but hung on for 16 years, until my back caved from all those years of looking around all that camera gear. It became time to go full force into repurposing my 40-year collection of celebrity photography, showing others what it was like to be shooting back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Thank you for joining us for the Celebrity Archaeology Podcast. You can read the show notes on celebrityarchaeology.com and pick up the link to the podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, you can subscribe, share the podcast, and tell your friends about it. You can also rate and review the podcast in iTunes. Join us next time for the Celebrity Archaeology Podcast.